All right, welcome to Mr. Miller's Woodshop podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Miller. Thanks for listening to the show. Please make sure you like, save, subscribe, follow, send, share, comment, all that fun stuff on all my platforms. Trying to get the word out, trying to help people is kind of the mission of this whole thing. So I'm really grateful you're listening to this end of the year podcast episode. It'll be the last one for 2024, and it'll take me through the new year. I'll start back up. If not early January, mid-January, I'm not really sure. But I don't have any notes for this episode. I'm just kind of reflecting here briefly. I'm in the thick of safety training right now into the second trimester. It's December 4th or 5th right now, and kids are just getting going. I'm getting my advanced kids to shake the dust off of everything they learned, a year or 2 years ago, and now that they're back in the wood shop, it's kind of cool. It's not a sustained program where it's 1 year, you do all three levels. It can be electively taken your freshman year, and then if you don't come back to your senior year, you could be sitting next to a kid that had cabinetry, a week ago. So it's kind of a unique thing, and it's kind of neat that I'm at a place now where I've been here for 4 years at the same school, and so there's not a ton of kids that had my predecessor, and so it's a continuation. So it's kind of nice to have a program up and running. I've actually never had that, to where I've had advanced kids that have only had me as a teacher, and it's kind of nice because I basically know what they know. So it's not have to guess and check, or am I going to tell them something that their teacher told them different. It's pretty neat, so I'm kind of just winging this one, but I'm reflecting on 10 years. So in November or December of 2015, I started substitute teaching for the Minneapolis Public School District, and it was after a devastating crush of not getting into a master's program at the University of Minnesota for my social studies teaching license. So I went for my history degree, hoping to be a history teacher. And thank God that didn't all work out. But I was devastated, didn't get into the program I'm a Gopher. I love the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And I've been a fan of their hockey and football teams my whole life. So when I got to go there, I was so pumped. I thought, this is going to be perfect. I'll get into their master's track. And no. And it stunk because I'm certified as a history major, bachelor's degree, first one in my family to have a bachelor's degree, and really embarrassed that the only job I could get that actually paid somewhat decently was a short call substitute teacher in Minnesota. And there were only a couple of districts at the time that even took that licensure. Some of them, that's the minimum license that you can have as just a plain old bachelor's degree. I had no teacher training at the time, and so the prospect of going into some of the more challenging schools in our state to be a one-day sub was really overwhelming, honestly. But November, December, I can't remember. Honestly, I think it was November I started in Minneapolis, and then I actually wrote to the Anoka-Hennepin superintendent and asked, are you guys going to accept this licensure? Because I am so eager to be the best history teacher the state has ever seen. And I didn't expect to hear back. But he actually emailed me that day and said, actually, yes, starting in January, we're going to be, or maybe it was December. I'm really fuzzy on all the dates, but I just know 10 years ago, I started my teaching career, and this isn't volunteering. This isn't student teaching. This is teaching. I am the teacher, the one in the classroom, the only adult in the room. And when I started out, I had no teacher training whatsoever other than just being a student 5 years prior. So it's kind of neat, too. It's more of a 15-year reflection, too, because I only graduated high school in 2010. So I'm 15 years out, and quite a bit has changed since then. And it's just kind of fun to think about, kind of sad to think about, too, just the aging process. So I had a meeting with another teacher yesterday, and it was concerning a student, and he's got some stuff going on, and so we're trying to think about the best way we can help him overcome some stuff. And we've got his stat sheet and reports and everything up, and I realize his birthday is in April of 2010, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this kid was born when I was just about to graduate from high school. It's just so wild to think that's where it is. And the teacher that I was talking to was in his 50s, and he just kind of smiled and was, very receptive and very warm to hear that, I'm kind of starting to realize this too, because as a teacher too, starting out, I kind of felt like the big brother of most of the kids. In fact, some of their older siblings were older than me. And so that was just such a weird thing, just being a couple years older than them. And starting as a substitute teacher, especially once I got into the Anoka-Hennepin district, a couple of the kids in my classes were actually friends of friends because, it was so-and-so's little brother, and they were 2 years younger than me. So it's like, oh, my gosh. So kids are coming up into the hallway and saying, hey, Bobby. And, like, hey, you can't call me that here. I think you got to call me Miller. And so that's just kind of a funny thing. So I started out 10 years ago. I would have been 22, and substitute teaching with nothing but just, an understanding of what a classroom kind of looks like. So, I guess where do I want to even start? So 10 years ago, my first substitute teaching gig was at South Minneapolis High School, and it was for a social studies teacher, which I wanted to go into. And it was really funny. The guy's name, the teacher that I was subbing for, was Robert Miller, which was my name. And there's a ton of us, so don't feel like you can go and track him down and, try and find him, because there's a ton of us Robert Millers. And he had a hyphenated last name too, so it was like Robert Miller Penning or something like that. But I was like, okay. And I'm trying to be really selective too on which job I take as my first sub gig, because I wanted to go to a school that I recognized, and it just so happened I was kind of interested in a gal that was a graduate of South Minneapolis High School, and so she's normal and interesting, so maybe these kids will be normal and interesting, and hopefully receptive to a new substitute teacher. And I kind of thought, I want to be in social studies, so if a kid asks me a question, I can know the answer to it, and what's in a name, right? But when that Jobulator sub app popped up, Robert Miller, Social Studies, South Minneapolis High School, I'm like, okay, that's probably divinely inspired. Like, this is the one I got to take. And so I accepted the position and got the confirmation. And it was like 2 days later, I'm like, oh my God, I'm nervous. And I had everyone in my corner in my family. And actually, this was 22. Yeah, I was dating my wife at this point now, so I'm kind of fogging up on these dates, because I just started dating my wife 10 years ago, so that's kind of fun to think about. So I took the job at South High kind of thinking like, okay, this gal Emma, who I knew before, was at South High, so I don't know, that's probably too much information for you guys to kind of be interested in here, but my wife's family was on my side and advocating, you're going to do great. We're praying for you. We think you're going to do such a great job. You're going to rock it. Like, it was wonderful to have that. But like walking into the school, never been there before. Different. I'm from the north side of the metro area, so it's kind of a hike out of my neighborhood. It was nerve-wracking, but I was fortunate enough to, stumble my way into the classroom after going to the office and getting all my stuff that I need, attendance sheets and things like that. Actually getting set up in his room, the teacher actually came in and I introduced myself. I'm like, hey, my name's Robert Miller too. He's like, oh, I go by Bobby. Like, yeah, so do I. Perfect. Kind of funny there. And he had a mountain of a report. And that's kind of what I remember too as a student, like the teacher being gone tried not to be a hiccup in the day or the week for you. Like, it was supposed to be business as usual. Now I've kind of seen, and I've partaken in this myself, where the teacher's gone and the sub day is basically a study hall hour, and I don't like that, but my first time substitute teaching, that's what I expected, and I'm looking at this group assignment that we're going to group the kids here, they're going to discuss, they're going to get the article, read through it, popcorn style, and then they're going to shift the groups. And so it was really fun to see, like, there's a lot of strategy involved in grouping kids, and I've since incorporated that into all my classes too, so it's fun to see 10 years later exactly what he was doing. But I totally flopped. I misread the report. He walked me through it, but then, an hour goes by where now I'm back to the class where we had to do this group activity, and I flopped. I did the second part first, and the kids kind of realized, like, oh, this isn't the order it was supposed to go in. It doesn't make sense. But, this guy, teacher that, I didn't tell anybody it was my first day either. I kind of figured blend in, end of the trimester, kind of come in and everything will be set. And I had just been licensed myself, so we had that to contest with. But I was grateful for that experience. I went back to South High pretty regularly after that. That was, one of my safe schools that I had success with and not success. I mean, I got the great opportunity to fail a ton as a substitute teacher and kind of find my bearings as like how my teacher style is. And I've kind of figured like this is kind of cool because I can try different personalities or personas at different schools. And if you're a new teacher looking at this, just be yourself. Because I kind of thought maybe when I go to Maple Grove High School out in the West Metro, I can be a little bit more flamboyant and maybe try to be as energetic as possible and see how that goes in those classes. And then, the next day I don't come back, and so no one remembers me anyway. So even if I make a fool of myself and tell the story about when I worked on a construction site and they nicknamed me Blanquito, and everybody's dying laughing in the Spanish class because they know what that implies. And so I can leave that after that joke and kind of go elsewhere, and I don't recommend that, okay? I'm saying this is not the thing to do, but I had zero teacher training at the time, so no one told me just to be myself, even though that's kind of the cliche, right? But I had a opportunity to teach out in White Bear Lake, which was nowhere near where I thought I wanted to go, and that's in the east side of the metro area here, kind of just north of St. Paul if you're looking at a map. And it was so far from my house, I kind of figured that's, just one to kind of get some experience. So when I showed up, I introduced myself and just kind of was myself. I, told the jokes that made sense to me, that were appropriate, that fit my, I like to be intense and kind of get people going too at times. And so I was able to do that. And because I didn't think I was actually going to ever get employed or have a future there, I didn't think to sink any other kind of effort, sadly, just to kind of go there because, there's extra jobs there and I can fill my full-time thing. But I ended up liking that the most because I would go there and I started to build some rapport with the other teachers and the students there. I really connected with because I was only a couple years older than them, if you think about it. And their high school was set up to where it was only 11th grade and 12th grade. So it was like being among my peers, honestly. And I'm just helping them, bridge the gap until they get back to their real teacher. So it was really kind of neat. The difference that kind of chapped me towards the end is I actually connected so well there. I student taught there in social studies, and they had a position open in social studies at the end of my tenure. The 12 weeks, whatever it was, a position became available, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I am a student teaching right here in the department. And so this would be such a natural thing, but their processes were set up so that if I didn't interview and say the right keywords on this recorded interview, I wouldn't be allotted a second interview, and there was nothing I could do to overcome that. I had every single teacher advocating, all but one, I should say, not everyone, but all but one advocating for me to get this position. The other one had a buddy that wanted to get the job, so that's like there was nothing salacious there. There was no wrong or controversy. It was just I had everyone but one, and actually neither of us got it. It went to this person that really, hearing reports from my cooperating teacher in the following years, it wasn't a good fit. The guy didn't end up staying, and I mean, hindsight, I'm so glad it didn't work out, but it really just kind of burned me because my wife and I got married. We actually moved out there. We're both student teaching in the district. It's such a sweetheart story, right? But to not even get a second interview is really kind of a challenging thing after having substitute taught there for 3 years, student teaching there. So basically volunteering a ton of time and helping them out. The hindsight, the silver lining is, though, that I got the opportunity to connect with their auto shop teacher, and he kind of showed me some of the path and a lot of the trouble that they go through to get licensed if they don't have the proper licensing, which I was starting to go for at the time as a tech ed instructor. I was getting my social studies license, right? But you can't just go off and get a tech ed or a CTE license in Minnesota at that point anyway. It might have changed since. Hopefully it has. But I need to have an initial licensure first to add that CTE on. So I ended up finishing that social studies license so I could get my CTE license. I've since dropped the social studies license. But connecting with him was super fun because I got to see that, wow, when kids want to be here, it's a different vibe, and connected with some of the middle school teachers in the Anoka Hennepin district, and they kind of spelled out the path to do this in Minnesota and the people to talk to and know. And so, I mean, substitute teaching really got me on the track of being a shop teacher, which is pretty cool. And I try to pay that forward now, but, you know, the times have changed, you know, not just for me and my practice because I'm getting older, and now I kind of am fulfilling the role of, you know, kind of being the dad in the classroom because, well, one, I talk about my kids a ton. I don't talk about them online, and so you guys probably forget that I've got 3 young kids at home. None of them can feed or clothe themselves, so, like, I am busy. And so I love them to death, so it's really easy for me to talk about. I just don't think they would want, I don't know if they would want me talking about them when they're 14, 15. Like, do you want all these stories? You know, I kind of related to a pastor's kid. Like, I don't want to have them have their whole childhood online documented. I want to document what's going on, the good in my classrooms, but, like, you guys don't need to hear about the stories of my son at the BMX track. Like, it's at 2 years old. Like, they're good stories, but and I think I could cash in and, you know, get some extra following and, you know, cheap whatever points because that's what all the influencers do. But I just don't want to do that to my kids, and so that's, you know, kind of why I leave them out. But my students definitely hear about them, so I kind of, you know, position myself as the father role. I feel like I still don't look all that old. I'm not, you know, as agile or thin or whatever, but it's kind of crazy to think of, too, when I started teaching, you know, I'm 22, 23, and when I got my first full-time gig, I was 26 up at Cambridge, and a couple of students, too, the Wise Guys students, would call me young man when they would address me, and that just, it still kind of chaps me, honestly, when they say, you know, we got a young man. Like, I've been doing this for a decade, and it's probably just pride that's getting in the way of that, but yeah, now that it's kind of a little bit different too, and two, it's I don't feel like these students are my peers anymore, so I have a different scope too of how I treat them, and it's probably for the better too because I hold them to a little bit higher standard. I think, you know, I still give grace when it's warranted, but, you know, I'm not just looking the other way at times like a big brother would. Like, for instance, like, literally, this is a big brother situation. When I was dating my wife, I was subbing at Blaine High School, and my soon-to-be brother-in-law was a student there. And we would go snowboarding together. I'd go with his buddies, and so, like, I knew a bunch of them. And it was weird seeing them in the classroom, and it only happened a couple times, but it was just, I think, weird for both of us. It was exciting because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm subbing for Drew in a week. That's Zach's 4th hour teacher. Like, cool. All right. What's that actually going to look like? And, like, on, you know, Valentine's Day, I got to hand out flowers. I'm like, wow, this one is from my brother-in-law. Here you go, you know, so-and-so. Like, and I wasn't mentioning that because I was just dating my wife at the time, and it was a little weird, too, because, you know, I would enjoy going snowboarding with these guys, and, you know, we'd race, and it's like we're buddies, right? Now, come Monday morning, you're sitting in my classroom that I'm subbing for. Like, this is kind of weird, and they would love it, too. When I would sub for them, they would get real rowdy, and they were just kind of the bunch of dudes that they were, you know, that love snowboarding and extreme sports, and like, okay, now we got to learn English, guys. Like, and you need to do what I say because I'm the teacher in the room. And of course, they didn't take that all that well. And I kind of just at that point decided, like, you know, I'm gonna wave the white flag because I also don't want to, you know, compromise my relationship with this amazing girl that I'm dating. And it's just kind of weird at that point that I go from the big brother at, you know, 24, and then couple years go by and I'm 28, and then I've got a student in my class that's a freshman in high school. They're 14, and I think about it, I'm twice as old as they are, and that just kind of struck me at 28. And that was the year I had my first kid. My daughter was born when I was 28, And so I was like, okay, I got literally a dad now, and I'm twice as old as these kids. And it wasn't like this was blindsided, right? Like I knew I was going to get older, but it just seems to happen faster and faster as the years go on, because 30 came and went, and I lived that Alan Jackson or the Tim McGraw song, my next 30 years. And as I think about it now, when I turned 30, I was also asked to teach welding that year, and I'm not a welder. Like I can get it started, or I once it's set up for me, like I can usually lay a decent bead, but it's nothing that's going to be structural or nice to look at. And now I got to teach it, and so, all right, I'm turning 30, so I'll kind of take that as my year to learn some new things. And I had kind of just stuck to what I know, beforehand. It's all that I had the opportunity to do. But now that I'm 30, I had another kid at 30. Kind of figured like, okay, and this, my first was a girl, my second is a boy, and so like, okay, some different, stuff as far as like how you treat a boy baby to a girl baby, or not so much dresses and unicorns, like obviously into trucks and things that got wheels, because he's right now like he's 2 years old, but he's a BMX just maniac, like at 2 years old, and my daughter's in dance, so it's like. At 30, I kind of figured, like, let's start learning some of this new stuff. So I took a couple welding classes at the college nearby in Okotek. I took a summer job learning how to weld at a welding shop, and it was only maybe 10% welding. It was probably 80% prepping the welds for the actual welders, and if the grass needed mowing, I was the mowing dude, or, you got to, load coming in, I want you to load up the trailer and stuff like that, is kind of my job. But I got the access to the industry, got to learn that, and when I turned 31, I thought, okay, good, I'm done doing that, I'm going to go back to what I like. And right after I turned 31, we had a church social event where we played hockey, and what's cool about Minnesota hockey is they turn out a wonderful product. I spent 15 years of my valuable childhood doing nothing but hockey, and I am a dang good hockey goalie. And I proved that again at 31 after not having skated since pre-COVID. So I was off the ice for 3 years, and we recruited some good college hockey kids to play at our event. So it would be entertaining to watch, not just a bunch of old has-beens or people learning how to skate. So it was a competitive game, but I was the factor in that game. So we were outshot, but we won because I played well. Okay, I am trying to be humble here, but I was the factor. I played well, and we wouldn't have won if not for me. And I kind of picked the team I was on because I figured the pastor set the teams. He would probably load the other team so that he wouldn't think that, or he would probably load his team so that, he would win. But he did the opposite because he's a, pastor, loving guy, and wanted to be fair. And he's good too because he played hockey growing up, and we got outshot. The play was in our zone the entire time, but we won. So, that was kind of confirmation after a year of just like, yeah, I'm 30, I'm getting old, and, all that stuff. But I'm learning something new. And so right after I turned 31, we have the hockey game, and I'm reminded, I'm also good at the things I've been working at my whole life. And 32 now, coming up on 33, and I'm looking at it like I just kind of need to do this as my life. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm learning BMX because my son is into it, and so I'm getting my old bike repaired right now so I can join him and try and learn it as well. And this is a serious event too, and luckily it's really cheap to get started. There's definitely a hook involved later on where it's like, okay, it's $40 for a year for a 2-year-old, but then when they turn 6, it's a big step up. When they turn 10, it's another big step, but wonderful thing, right? And that's the way with anything. My daughter's dance is a month what my son's BMX is for a year. And dance, I'm a spectator there, but I'm interested. I'm interested in what my daughter's doing, ballet and tap, and so I'm just trying to learn all the extras, and it comes into work with me too. If I'm teaching welding, I want to learn welding. If I'm trying to bring lathe work back into the wood shop. It was written out of our curriculum about a decade ago, sadly. But now that I've kind of got my hands on the curriculum piece and where it's going, I want to bring lathes back to the wood shop, but I really only have the experience of making pens with my dad when I was in high school. And so I'm not a lathe turner, but that's just one thing. Like, I'm going to spend some time, learn it safely. I'll learn it with the kids, my students at first, and then once we figure out the basics, we'll go to the segmented bowls and all the exciting other things we can do on a lathe. Like, at this, the sky is the limit, right? And now I'm just sitting here on the ground looking up like, yeah, I want to go there. So, it's going to take some learning on my end, and because I don't know, I'm not just going to say, well, it's not really my thing. Like, no, I'm going to go and learn it. And so that's kind of where I'm reflecting now and kind of seeing, like, that's kind of just got to be a lifestyle and mindset that I take. So 10 years in, it's really exciting. I've got a program that I'm taking pride in and a little bit more say, like, Miller might be sticking around. He's tenured. He's got a very popular, exciting program, and so I'm hopeful that in the years to come we can grow it even more and that I can kind of specialize. Right now I kind of run around like a chicken with his head cut off with all these other preps and different classes that I teach, and I'm grateful to be full-time, obviously, but I kind of think my skill set lies in the wood shop, not so much architectural drafting or graphic design. I'm happy to do those things. That's one thing too. Like, I'm happy to learn screen printing, but it's not something I'm thinking about when I'm going home. When I'm going home, I'm really excited still about woodworking. It's not something I can just turn off. Like, I'm excited. I can kind of drum up some excitement in class and graphics, but at home, I'm really not thinking about t-shirt design. Anyway, in the next 10 years, so I'm going to pause right here. If you've listened to me this far ramble, please send this to somebody. I'm trying to grow this. If I'm trying to be strategic about this too, or if I grow this to a point where it can start to take off and it can be used at different colleges. There's some staffing agencies that are using this podcast as a metric or a resource for their people. There's some conviction ministries that are using this. Hey!
You want to come down and see it?
Yes, I do. Sorry about that, folks. I'm on my prep hour here and had another teacher come in, which is kind of a really cool way to transition here. So I think I was just saying you should like and subscribe and send to somebody else, but definitely do that because it kind of transitions what I'm talking about here. So the teacher that was coming in was the art teacher. She's reporting back on the mural that she's painting for me in the wood shop, and it is awesome. Okay, she did the contour lines. I'm learning all about graffiti pens, and it's nothing woodworking related, but I'm just learning all this because we're partnering together because she's taking a class on how to do a mural. And I approached her at the beginning of the year asking if she could paint something or her kids could paint something cool on the wall. So it's not just this nasty wall that's been double painted 3 times, and I got to run here soon, but dang it. I'm looking forward to the next 10 years. What I've got going on here and bringing the online presence, I think, is going to be a good thing for the industry. I really don't know what it's going to become. I don't want to leave the classroom really ever. I love what I do. I'm 3 days into the trimester, and it's set up and go. I'm getting better every day. I bring in something new each time, but I'm not looking to just occupy a space in a school and just do the same thing over and over, press rewind and play again. Like I'm really excited for where this is going because it's come quite a ways. Like, I was a product of a wood shop that was unbelievable 15 years ago. It looks way different now. Like, it's just the ability to be online, to use your phones as a resource. I really think we're coming to the end where teachers are fighting phones, and I say that in a school that's gone 0 phones, so you can see where I'm sitting at, right in the crosshairs, requiring kids to use their phones as a resource for their differentiated education so that we're more efficient and effective in the wood shop. So I really do see the next 10 years as an end to that. When I was in high school in 2008, 2009, It was forbidden. You cannot have a phone out. If it's on your desk, that I'm taking it. Like it was gospel back then. You did not have your phone out. My senior year, they started to let up. They said, okay, you can have your phones at lunchtime and during passing time. And the phones back then flipped. They had physical buttons. Some of them, the expensive ones, were sliders and had keyboards on the front. And when you opened them up, like it was just a funny little time in history back then. But starting teaching 5 years later, I see that things have changed. Like when I walked into one of the classrooms and a kid had their cell phone out on the desk, I'm like, do I have to take this? Is this wrong? Like, no, nobody, like we can have our phones out in here. And I double check with the secretaries and like, yeah, as long as it's not a problem. You know, if you you have your own policy too, you can use that. And it was really relaxed by then. And it was different at every school. It was different in every teacher's expectations. You know, it's a new frontier. It must be like when electricity started to come into schoolhouses, where it was like, okay, where is this appropriate? Where is it good? Okay, do we have telephones in every room? It's such a funny thing. If you listen to my podcast from the last couple of weeks, I talked about the Minnesota CTE Summit and just how, people were against the railroads. They were against electricity. They were against gunpowder. But once that cat's out of the bag, like what is it? Once the cat's out of the bag, like it's really hard to get them back in. Once that bell has been rung, you can't unring it. Like the smartphones are here, then why are we fighting them? Let's utilize them. Like it's the most powerful tool that they have access to. And for me, it makes teaching so much easier. I'm not hiding the ball anymore. So our school went 0 phones, and I'm kind of in the crosshairs of a couple people in school, and I'm successful. So of course, some people maybe not liking that. And I had an AP actually come in one of the first days of the school, like, okay, he says he's just walking around, but I know he's got his ear to the ground. And I told the students my policy is that I expect you guys to use them for differentiated instruction. All right, when you guys are ready for the demo on how to cut down your top, here's the QR code on how to use the panel saw. Scan it with your phone. It's a YouTube video of me doing that exact step. I'm not doing this live. If you don't have a cell phone, I'll do it live for you. Okay, we'll work together. All of it is digital. All of my students have their own provided Chromebook that they can use. Like I've tried to make this as foolproof as possible and give them as many resources as I could possibly do. Because when I was in high school, we didn't have Google Classroom or Skyward or any of the Schoology, none of the learning management software systems that are available now. I mean, they were probably in their infancy back then, but it's powerful what we've got access to on the internet for how we can provide resources to kids. And that's kind of my MO, is I want to be the most resourceful teacher out there and have the videos available for the kids that have the questions. Maybe they don't want to ask me. Maybe they were gone and they just want to go right to it. I'm 3 days in, and the kids that missed the first couple days, I've got those whole days recorded. So a kid that missed the first day, he's lost, okay? He takes my class. I've got a QR code on the door. Dude, you missed the first day? That's fine. Watch this over, dinner with your family or on the bus ride home. It's 45 minutes. It's a long one, but you know what? If you watch this, you didn't actually miss that first day. Talked to a kid today. I asked him, hey, did you watch that video? He's like, yeah, it was really good. So that's what you talked about on Monday? Yep, that's what we went over. Not all that exciting, all that kind of, try to make it fun for him too. He's like, yeah, it was kind of boring, ha, ha, ha. Yeah, whatever, okay. But now you're caught up. You know the systems that are in place that I'm going to be expected you to know. So I like the resources. The social media, I'm just excited about that too, because I'm not trying to be Mr. Instagram or, anything like that. We got a skills gap in this country, and a bunch of people are willing to help. It's just, how do we get those people together? What happened to me on LinkedIn when Microvellum discovered me is going to change the trajectory of our district's budget meeting. And we're the biggest district in the state, and we're facing a $26 million budget deficit. now Microvellum is willing to donate upwards of $1 million worth of software to us. That's pretty darn cool. So that's kind of my last 10 years in a nutshell. I'm excited for the next 10 years. I'm hopeful that you stick with me. I'm hopeful that I can stay here. I'm not tied anywhere professionally. I'm just a guy trying to help people. I'm not averse to leaving education or leaving my current school. I'm not fearful of starting over. I am set down roots for my family. We've got our community. We go to church in the same spot. We are hopefully going to live in the same, but I'm not even tied to my house. I don't want to move away from my family, so I'm not moving to Oklahoma or Colorado or anywhere. But, I'm not averse to moving, a little bit outside of my comfort zone if I can still stay close to my family. I don't mind traveling, traveling for work. But, I'm open. Okay, it's a joke that my wife and I tell that we had 5 different homes our first 5 years of marriage, but it's kind of the case. In the last 10 years, really the last 15 years, I've probably had a dozen jobs, and I haven't been fired from a single one yet. So I'm always leaving for bigger, brighter, and better, and I'm excited for what this has to offer, and I'm really excited that you guys are following along with me, and thanks for sticking around. That was our bell here, so I got to run and teach my advanced woodworking class now. I'll talk to you next time, guys. Thank you. Bye.